So today I'm wrapping up this series that I've really enjoyed sharing with you, a series I called Learning from the Masters, and we've looked at spiritual leaders, beginning with Jesus, looking at Gautama the Buddha. We've looked at humanitarians like Mother Teresa, bright thinkers like Albert Einstein, social activists like Martin Luther King Jr. and Mahatma Gandhi. And today I want to wrap up with one I have never spoken about before. I did this series about 10 or 12 years ago, but there weren't enough Sundays in the months that I was giving a series, so I never gave this talk, and I had a chance to write this one that really speaks to me, and hopefully it will to you as well. I've entitled it The Art of Co-Creation, Awakening the Master Within, and I want to talk to you about the wisdom, the brilliance of Leonardo da Vinci, Amazing person. We think of him, when I say Leonardo da Vinci, what do you think of first? Right away. Painting, and what do you think of? Mona Lisa I'm hearing Last Supper. There's no wrong answer. It's just what you think of. I think of either The Last Supper or Mona Lisa, and I think primarily of him as an artist. That wasn't until I really, not just for this lesson, but years ago, started to understand and learn more about the true brilliance of this person and why he was called the Renaissance man. He had a mind of kind of an engineer. He very much had a scientific approach to everything, was talented in art in such a powerful way, and was really a very unique person. And I think whenever there are people who stand out in history from long ago or not so long ago, it is worth our while to stop and look at them, and not just look at them and admire them, but look at them and say, what about them might also be true of me? What about how they approach their work or their life or their time in history might inform me in how I approach my life and my place in history, who I am, and what difference I may be able to make in the world. In a way, we could say of Da Vinci that he was a sacred observer. He had a way of looking at things. When I think about the spiritual path and the spiritual journey, I think often about this idea of how we look at things as being so key to our spiritual practice. The way we look at one another changes, I believe. The more we grow in consciousness, the more we mature spiritually. The way we look at each other changes. The way we look at the world in which we live changes. The way that we look at the problems in our life changes. And the way that we look at the opportunities in our life changes. We become a sacred observer to life, seeing that everyone and everything can bless us, and that everyone and everything, when we are looking with the eyes of spirit, really comes, whether they know it or not, bringing us a gift that helps us to grow into our greatness, that helps us to grow into our mastery. And so there are 4 themes that I want to pull out from Leonardo da Vinci's life, the way he approached his work, the way he approached his life, and how that might inform and benefit us. And the first is, in part, what I've been talking about, the art of seeing. The art of seeing. In Unity, we talk about the importance of shifting our consciousness. We talk about looking at things from a different angle. I've shared with you many times from the platform that there is a mystical, metaphysical understanding of Jesus' teaching to turn the other cheek. That it's not exclusively about, or necessarily even literally about, when somebody strikes you on the cheek, go ahead and turn the other cheek. But what happens when you turn the other cheek? What happens? When I turn the other cheek, I now what? I am seeing something different because I'm looking from a different viewing point. I'm looking from a different viewing. A viewing point is different than a viewpoint. A viewpoint tends to be rigid. We have a lot of that going on in the world right now. Very rigid viewpoints, very right, wrong. A viewing point says, let me scan. Let me see if there is a different point of view I can hold based on where I am looking. In Unity, we talk about this, the importance of shifting our consciousness, of seeing the reality behind the appearance, seeing the reality or the divinity behind the person who's wearing the disguise of being difficult or sandpaper to our soul. Da Vinci's core philosophy was sapere vedere, meaning knowing how to see. Knowing how to see. He believed that truly looking at the world was a spiritual act. He was obsessed with how light wrapped around objects. He was obsessed with how water rippled, how human emotions registered on the face. Some of you in this room may have been to Milan and have seen the beautiful Last Supper. Did you know that when Da Vinci painted that in order to convey the range of emotions that you see when you look at that masterpiece, he spent time, I don't know how long, but a lot of time walking the streets of Milan, studying the faces of people so that he would have a sense of what does grief look like on a person's face? What does betrayal look like on a person's face? What does pain look like on a person's face? So that he could capture that, obsessed with seeing everything in life with clarity, with depth. He saw the divine drama playing out in people's faces and was able to put that into this beautiful masterpiece. Da Vinci said, the average human looks without seeing, listens without hearing, touches without feeling, eats without tasting, moves without physical awareness, inhales without awareness of odor or fragrance, and talks without thinking. Would you say that that's pretty true? Would you say that sometimes that also describes you? I know sometimes that describes me, that I can look without seeing, that I can listen without really hearing, that I can touch without really feeling, that I can eat without really tasting, all of those things. It's why in many spiritual practices, like if you go on an extended spiritual retreat, that the very ordinary things that you do in life are used as a practice to bring awareness. So for example, whether it is walking, or whether it is eating, or whether it is speaking or listening, that in a spiritual retreat setting, you're really encouraged to fully do that, whatever that is. So that if you're eating, you are really tasting the food. You are feeling the food. If you are touching something, you are really feeling it, the sensation of it. The average human looks without seeing, listens without hearing, touches without feeling, eats without tasting, moves without physical awareness, inhales without awareness of odor or fragrance, and talks without thinking. So what's a practical application of this for us in our lives, of sapere vedere? What's a practical application of it? It's to bring our full awareness to bear at whatever it is we are doing, wherever we are doing it. To challenge ourselves to look with fresh eyes, to look with childlike eyes, to look with soft eyes at the people before us, at the opportunities before us, the challenges before us. And when we look with different eyes, we will see something different. And when we see something different, there's a certain natural somewhat automatic inclination to respond differently and to respond better. A second that is really true of Da Vinci's work was the unifying of science and spirit. He didn't see a separation between science and spirit. You know, originally the church funded science, right? If you go back and you go back in your history, the church was the body that had the money. And I could go off on a tangent because of guilt and fear and manipulation and getting people to listen and obey and pay. And so the church had lots and lots of money and could fund the arts. People like Michelangelo, people like Da Vinci, to fund them and to fund science until science got a little too smart and started discovering things. Remember that guy Galileo? You know, discovering things that went contrary to what the church said. And then what did the church do? This divorce between science and religion, or science, well, you can divorce science and religion, but you dare not divorce science and spirituality. And Da Vinci was very much about seeing this union. And we are blessed to be in a teaching in unity. Some of you started in science of mind, the very word of that part of the New Thought movement, science of mind. And my dear friend Roger Teal would always add, Reverend Roger Teal, the science of mind and heart, the idea, the unity of these, of not separating. Da Vinci lived this truth through what was called connessione, the recognition of the deep interconnectedness of all things. Breathe into that for a moment. The deep interconnectedness of all things. He spent hours dissecting human cadavers and studying the flow of blood through the heart at the same time that he was studying the movement of waters and currents and rivers and the growth rings of trees, because he saw patterns, fractals in all of this. He saw the unity of all of it. He would draw these things side by side in his sketchbook. If you want to spend a few inspiring hours, go look through some of the documentaries on PBS and Nova and so forth about Da Vinci. I remember on one of our trips to France, toward the end of Da Vinci's life, like the last 3 years of his life, he left Italy and he went and lived outside of Paris. The king at the time funded his work, and there is a living indoor-outdoor museum that is kept intact. The last place that he lived, and many of his notebooks are there, and replicas of all of these machines that he tried to make. And you walk into this feeling and you see these sketches of the anatomy of a body, and yet the rivers of life and the oneness of all of it. He saw, as we would say in metaphysics, that there is a single life pulsating through everything. That's an important practical spiritual message for us to remember, that there is a single life pulsating through everything. We don't always stop long enough to see it, but the fact that we may not stop long enough to see it does not mean it is not there. It is there. When we are in the flow with it, all sorts of possibilities open to us. The one life, the one energy pulsing through you, pulsing through your neighbor, pulsing through the problem you have as well as the opportunity you have. He said, realize that everything connects to everything else. When we get that, we walk more carefully. We care more deeply. We live more consciously. We realize that we are not separate from the world around us. We begin perhaps to understand better the teaching of our indigenous people in the U.S. that had a practice, a long-standing practice of taking that long view because they knew the interconnectedness of all of life. That long view that said, before any decision, important decision, how will this impact the seventh generation from us? Oh man, would we be living in a different world if we were required to do that in our businesses, in every realm of politics, in our social realms, in our personal realms, would that not fundamentally change things? You're too quiet. It would absolutely change things. And that idea of caring about how we live because it impacts the seventh generation and beyond is birthed or grounded in this understanding of the interconnectedness of life. That no matter how alone you may feel or how inadequate you may feel at times, that you are more powerful than you realize that you are, and the energy and the actions you take, the decisions you make, the consciousness you hold really does matter. It does make a difference. You may not always see the difference it makes, but do not ever for a moment think that your life doesn't matter and that you're not making a difference, because you are. Because you are. Third is this idea of embracing the unknown. Embracing the unknown. Take that in for a moment. Do any of you struggle with that? This is an honest answer or an honest question. Do you struggle with embracing the unknown, with uncertainty? Do you like things to kind of line up? Do you like to know if it's yes or if it's no? If it's right or if it's wrong? Do this or do that? Your quietness tells me either I'm touching a chord. We're all so much alike. I really believe that we are. We struggle over some of the same kinds of things, no matter what we might look like on the outside. We all deal with a lot of stuff that's very, very similar. Embracing the unknown. In art, there's a term, I think it was applied first to Da Vinci's work, sfumato. And it refers to smokiness. If you've ever seen in person or a really good photograph of the Mona Lisa, it is a work of art that is absolutely sfumato, meaning if you look at her smile, if you look at her eyes, it's the blurriness. It's that there's no sharp lines. It was a technique that Da Vinci perfected, maybe originated. I don't know. I'm losing some of my art knowledge there, which is very limited. But it was a masterful technique, and it was this idea of stepping back from rigidity, from certainty, from finality. Sfumato represents a willingness to sit in the mystery. If you look at the Mona Lisa, what's one of the things that so many people say about her smile? It looks mysterious, doesn't it? And her eyes, there's like this mystery of where and how is she looking at you? Is she following you? All in this very tiny, when you see it in person, it's a surprisingly small piece of art for being so absolutely famous. Sfumato is like this idea of embracing ambiguity. Embracing ambiguity. We could go back to the lesson I shared with you on Lao Tzu. So much of the Tao Te Ching is this idea of embracing the paradox, embracing ambiguity, being comfortable without having clearly marked rigid lines. It is known of Da Vinci that he left a lot of his work unfinished, a tremendous amount. In fact, he didn't complete all that many paintings. I think it was maybe 15 or fewer, not all that many paintings. He left a lot of his work unfinished. And some historians look at that as a flaw, like he just couldn't finish. And yet, perhaps there's a different way of looking at it. Maybe he could sit with paradox. Maybe he could sit with letting something take form and shape over time without having to have it be set in stone at a particular point. He said, where there is shouting, there is no true knowledge. In other words, where there is this finite, it's got to be this way, I think he's saying there's no true knowledge. The ability to embrace paradox, Spiritual takeaway could be something like this: we don't need to have our whole lives figured out. to realize that we are in divine order. We don't have to have our whole lives figured out. I know I'm talking to me, even if you're listening. We don't have to have our whole lives figured out. Sometimes God calls us to step into the smoky mystery. Play with that for a moment. Could Spirit, could God, could infinite wisdom be inviting you right now to step into the smoky mystery of your life? If you have been wrestling with the answer to a question, do you go this way, do you go that way, do you do this, do you do that? Maybe the reason you're not getting any clear answer is that right now the invitation maybe is to sit in the smoky mystery. I like that phrase a lot better than uncertainty. The smoky mystery, say that with me. The smoky mystery, and trusting that. The spiritual journey, besides being a lot about perspective, in my opinion, is also an awful lot about trusting. And the last that I would share of the 4 ideas is his emphasis on the divine spark of action. Unity is an affirmative philosophy. We come together to learn, because there is a point in our coming into unity where there's a lot that we don't know about spiritual principle and practice. Most people who come to unity have come from something else, and so there's a period of time where we're learning the 5 principles, or we're learning about the 12 powers, or we're learning about affirmations and denials, or prayer treatment, and so forth. And then there comes a point in our practice where we really kind of know it, and then it becomes living by it even more fully and deeply. So we come to be reinforced, or we tune in to be reinforced to that which we are learning or that which we have learned, so that we can then take it out into the very fabric and the very laboratory of our lives. In the very places where we might be inclined to pull back and say it's too difficult to practice here, or clearly this person is the one exception to the divinity rule that all of us are divine. Clearly everybody but that person. If Wendy knew that person, she'd agree. That person is not divine, right? So we come together to learn. We come together to be reinforced. We come together, and hopefully we stay together, then to be an inspiration to others who are new, and then we take it out. The divine spark of action, what's our 5th principle in unity? It's that it is not enough to know these things, we need to practice these things. We need to take it out into our lives. Da Vinci was a fierce advocate for experiencia, the idea of acting. He called himself an unlettered man, which meant that he didn't have a whole lot of unlearning to do. He could have that Shoshin mind, that Japanese beginner's mind, and be able to approach things with fresh eyes and not have anything that he had to unlearn. He was so curious that when he was trying to understand, he was interested in flying. You may recall learning about some of that. And in order to try to better understand this concept of flight, he didn't just watch birds. He went out and bought caged birds from the marketplace and then released them so he could watch them fly out of that cage into freedom. The divine spark of action. The divine spark of action. He said, I have been impressed with the urgency of doing. Knowing is not enough. We must apply. Being willing is not enough. We must do. I'm going to repeat that. I've been impressed with the urgency of doing. Knowing is not enough. We must apply. Being willing is not enough. We must do. A Wendyism on this would be, we must get up off our affirmations and out into the application, off the affirmation and into the application. I like that. Say that with me. Off the affirmation and into the application. I mean, truly. And don't hear me say that I don't believe in affirmations. I do. But it's not enough to just be sitting with the affirmation. We need to be in the doing. Being willing is not enough. We must do. So spiritual principles are just theories. They're just theories until we put them into practice. It's what we do when we walk outside those doors, when we interact with the people that are in our neighborhood, our workplace, our businesses, our schools. That's where the rubber meets the road. And so as I wrap this up, Da Vinci left us a legacy not only of amazing, beautiful art, but of this idea of being a fully human spirit, reminding us that it's not enough just to know and not enough just to be willing. We actually need to get out there. So if you look at your life, or let's just break it down, not your whole life. If you just look at this week as a canvas, how would you paint that canvas this week? What would that canvas look like? What colors would be there? What textures would be there? How big would it be? Would it have sharp, clear lines? Would there be that sfumato, that smoky ambiguity and mystery? We each are given the gift, every time we wake up in the morning, we're given the gift of a brand new day to use and invest and create any way we want. You may not paint, you may not sculpt, you may not do the things that might first come to mind as artistic, and yet each of us is the artist of the canvas of our own life. We get to decide the colors, the shapes, the feeling, the texture. Paint it beautiful. Namaste.